wai o te motu, tēnā tātou. Ko tēnei te mihi kia koutou no te whanganui a tara. Taranaki whānui te ati awa Ngāti Toa, rātou kia koutou katoa ngā haue whā o te motu o te ao, tēnei rā, o reira tēnā tātou. Kia ora everybody.
Kia ora, councillors, tēnā koe. Please meet my colleagues and myself, Gisela, Head of Creative Capital, Andy, Stephen and Lucy will all be speaking today. We've got about 30 minutes worth of material. We're going to go at a pretty fast clip and, as Terry said, take questions at the end. What is Aho Tini? We're looking here at the Council's Arts, Culture and Creativity Strategy that was passed in August 2021. It was co-designed with the sector, and on the screen is showing you the structure of the strategy, which is 4 aho, strands, chords, a weft in the weaving. As the language and the image on the screen suggests, it's intended to weave together and support each other. So we're talking about a holistic system. Also important to note is this is a 10-year strategy. We're not even at halfway point on this yet. When the strategy passed, as well as sector support, it had pan-council support, and all the councillors we have dealt with in the last triennium and in this triennium have been very sensitive and interested in the creative sector and have wanted to see it flourish. Those aho, and I've sent you links to both the strategy and the action plans, and I've also sent you the breakdown of the action plan. So what's on the screen at the moment is really showing you how the 4 aho translate in the strategy into 2 boxes. In effect, what the approaches we'll take to those aho will be over the 10 years, and then what we expect to see in 2030. If you want to see the wording under those boxes, of course, it's in the strategy itself. A number of things shapes how the council has been able to implement the strategy. One is the level of investment in any LTP that the council chooses to make. The second is the roles we play. And on the screen is a diagram you're familiar with. We can operate services ourselves as a provider. We can fund others to provide them, and that's a significant element in our work. We can facilitate and form partnerships. Regulation can also be important. Noise zoning in the district plan, for instance, has a direct effect on the independent music industry. That's the strategy. What we're talking about today is the action plan, which sits under it, years 1 to 3. It was passed at the same time as the strategy and developed in conjunction with it. The action plan that was passed has 72 actions in total. This 72 actions, which in effect is a long list of clauses and sub-clauses, reflects the format that was in vogue at the time it was passed. That approach to action plans has actually been modified by Council since it passed, and how we do them now is shaping 4 to 6, which I'll talk to at the end of the presentation. So 72 actions, years 1 to 3, how have we done? In effect, 78%, 56 of the 72, have either been achieved or significant progress has been made. 10 actions, which is 14% of the total, have not been started. That includes, for instance, in-depth financial modelling of Wellington's creative sector or creative economy, and 8%, or 6 actions, have been ruled not in time frame, often because they weren't funded or there wasn't sufficient resource to do them, or in some cases they were probably scoped in a way that felt, when we came to look at it, it was hard to do it. So examples of this would include the fact that the action plan asked us to start planning for the Tatiriti 2040 bicentenary. We were asked to look at a housing strategy for artists. We were asked to work with Greater Wellington Council on bus travel to events and performances. But relatively speaking, my son said to me last night, "Is that an A-, Mum?" So I suggested it was an A, actually. But 78% of the 56 actions, 78% of the total is either achieved or in significant progress. We've been pretty busy while we've been doing this. There's been a lot of activity. On the screen is some of the key stats that the Creative Capital team has delivered over this time. I think we're all particularly proud of simply the number of Wellingtonians who enjoy and participate in the activities that are related to the creative sector the council's involved in. Over 1.2 million people there, plus the figures to Toi Punaki and the Hana. And secondly, 84% of Wellingtonians, that's the rating for their satisfactions. It's a high rating of satisfaction with what we do deliver. We'd also draw your attention to the 1,200 odd contractors that we employ. One of the things that was asked of us was to make sure that we were giving employment to the creative sector, and that's quite a big figure. And also, I've got on the screen there 3 celebrations of civic venues. We started that with the St James opening, we continued it with the Hana and the Embassy, and we're currently gearing up for Te Matapihi.
Oh, tēnā tātou. When Tini was launched, the optics of the arts in Wellington City Council were very different from what they are now. Since 2023, we've made a conscious shift towards the inclusion of Māori and mana whenua and other diverse groups, which has really seen the visibility of Te Ao Māori grow in the arts in Wellington. And obviously this has been enabled and facilitated by the cross-council strategies Tupiki Ora Tākai Here, as well as Ahotini. These strategies and working collaboratively with other units has meant that our Māori and diverse artists across the whole city are more supported and visible here. Now when visitors come from out of town to Te Whanganui-a-Tara, they have some glimpse of mana whenua visible here in the city through public art, murals, playgrounds and more. And this will be even more visible with the opening of Te Matapihi, Te Ngākau and reimagining Toi Punaki. One of the requests from the arts sector during the Ahotini strategy research was for more marketing and advertising support for the arts sector. In 2022, Creative Capital will set up a partnership between the Embassy Theatre Trust and Wellington City Council, which would offer a free marketing channel on the giant billboards on the Embassy Theatre to any arts organisations in the city. Since 2022, there's been a number of firsts as well, as we've driven collaboration, connection, experimentation, and really pushed boundaries around what we can do. I really want to highlight the importance of the first D-Deaf and Disabled Artist Residency at Toi Punaki, which is now into its 3rd resident. The inaugural citywide project Make Visible Te Whanganui-a-Tara was piloted working with Rainbow Takatapui artists, organisations and businesses to really make visible our history, our Rainbow and Takatapui history in Wellington. And this project resulted in significant changes within large organisations such as PwC International and others. We've had a huge focus on Pacifica and Māori interns working on events design and delivery of things like Waitangi and Pacifica Festival for the first time, which is really all about developing sustainable careers in the arts. And the last 2 points on the screen will be discussed later on.
Off the back of the opening of the St James Theatre, where we projected onto the facade images of the architectural gems inside that have been restored, for the Royal New Zealand Ballet's return to the reopened theatre, we partnered with digital content leader ClickSuite and AV production company Streamliner, based here in Wellington, to bring a unique promotion for their Cinderella season. It delighted the commuting public in Courtney Place and resulted in an upturn in ticket sales, along with winning a prestigious Good Design Award. On the screen here is outlined a portion of those whom the Council has funded through our funding programs, such as the Arts and Culture Rounds, Capital of Culture and Regional Amenities funding. Through this, we're able to program the city with year-round activity, from large street festivals such as Cuba Duper and Newtown Festival, to dance, music and theatre, as well as the numerous smaller community events and cultural festivals. All this activity provided valuable employment for practitioners in the sector, alongside delivering to the creative capital brand. Now, these activations and events were not just centred in our CBD, but reached out across the city, from Tara in the north to Island Bay in the south. We show a portion of which are mapped here, the orange being those funded and the yellow being those we produce. Activities range from the ever-popular Spring into Tawa to a small Matariki event in Mapuia. Over 140 activations and well over 400 performances in the city's numerous venues. Now, the CBD is still an important player in the arts ecology, with a cultural spine running from the Hannah Playhouse, Bats and the Embassy Theatre in the southeast, to Takina, St James, Opera House, through to Tanako, ending in the northwest with the TSB Arena and Wellington Museum. It's a walkable hub of arts activity facilities that drive the city's arts ecology and its nighttime economy.
So during this time, we've been focused on what we think of as big ticket items that deliver multiple elements of the Aho Tini 2030 strategy. It's easy to be busy doing a whole lot of activity, but our interest has been to drive major change for the sector and for the communities in Wellington in the longer term. We're going to talk, the big ticket items are on the screen, and we're going to talk to each of these in turn. I'd like to start with venues, and it's worth just recapping what venues are and how we think about them. First off, councils obviously provide roads, pipes, they provide swimming pools, they provide libraries, and they provide visitor destinations for the good of the community. Visitor destinations are where people come together for live performance. So there is a social interaction around these venues that is an important component of a healthy society. What's on the screen is saying to you that it's important not to think of venues as isolated halls and consider each of them in their own terms. It's equally important to think of them as an integrated network, starting with where artists and arts organisations create and rehearse work through to where they perform and record and film it. So that network and that having an understanding of the flow from across those processes is crucial to, in the end, what we see, for instance, on stage in the Opera House. Council has a portfolio of these kinds of venues of significant value, which has been built up by successive generations. And a significant portion is, to Wellington's advantage, focused on Tanako Civic Square, with others in the immediate vicinity, the Opera House and the TSB Arena, and then others still a little bit further but still close by, the St James, the Embassy, and the Hannah. We also have, moving towards Newtown, I think that's moving south, we have, we touch our own Toi Pōnaki, currently in Abel Smith Street, and then we hit the Newtown hub, the second hub, which is the Te Whaia concentration and the Tāwhiri warehouse. So who uses them? Well, these venues are beloved by the community over generations, and they're widely used by a full spectrum of Wellingtonians. On the screen is a portion, not all, of those who were using the Wellington Town Hall in the last 2 years before it closed. Venues are a significant enabler of the community, as I say, because people come together to have shared experience. And if any of you were at the opening of the St James and the sense in the audience of we're back here together, it was an emotional moment. The Venues Network has been a major focus of Creative Capital's work actually prior to the passing of Aho Tini, but given wind beneath our wings by the actions that you approved in Aho Tini, we've got 3 focal points here. One is the people who make the work and the organisations and ecosystem that supports that production, which are the producers and artists. Secondly, but equally, the visitors and the citizens of Wellington who participate in and share these experiences. And then thirdly, what is it happens when you bring people together for live experiences? If we look at each of these in turn, there are issues specific to each group, and then there's one in common. So what the Venn diagram shows on the screen is issues that we have distilled and clarified over the last 2 years. Of course, we all want to see escalating use of our venues by the local and arts sector. We want to see it for the arts sector, but we actually want to see it for Wellington. And of course, doing so drives economic activity. But there are 2 impediments, if we consider this, for instance, for the producers and artists, and they're on the screen. So looking at this through the lens of the producer-artist focus, first off, we have established over the 2 years that our venues are among the most expensive in the country. It's related to the additional equipment and staffing costs which are layered onto base rate, and which other venues in other parts of New Zealand include to a greater, lesser degree in the rental. But secondly, we can't achieve utilisation of venues if we don't simultaneously consider the development structure needed for creatives to make work that can succeed in large-scale houses. This is why we are simultaneously driving the strategy behind the Hana, the Tāwhare Warehouse, and indeed Toi Pōneke, where people have dance studios and theatre facilities to rehearse. I must say, and I'm going to talk briefly about my experience as Chief Executive of WOW, that we see this in WOW, where WOW needs to be able to recruit directors who can handle a 4,000-seat venue. And that's very difficult to achieve in New Zealand, where very few people get to work at that scale. So the question of capability in the venues is equally as important as the cost. Citizens and visitors, if I go there, which is actually Wellingtonians, it's ratepayers, it's the people who rent, it's the people who make up our community. The thing to understand about Wellington is that we have a notably poor visitor experience in our venues compared to a number of other venues across the city. Our focus in the council has tended to be on construction, getting it built, and has tended to focus on the auditorium. So what is the experience inside the auditorium? We tend to forget or not pay sufficient attention to the fact that people want a drink or an ice cream before or during a show. And the facility that we produce around that has a direct influence on visitor behaviour. So again, if I cite WOW, if we're thinking about venues, a number of our venues, people are thinking, what's the latest I can get there to take my seat? They're not thinking, how do I come down an hour and a half earlier, have a drink, have a meal, enjoy the vibe? The council partnered with WOW when I was CE to in fact build the hub outside the TSB arena that goes up every WOW show in order to attract in our audience, our 60,000 over 3 weeks, in order to have them in the centre of town much earlier than, say, the last minute, can I get there in time? Why this is important, apart from the experience of the whole show itself, is that we know that the events and performance ecosystem drives the nighttime economy, and it drives hospo, retail and accommodation spend. So WOW, with its 3-week performance run, is a shining example of this. What the arrows are showing you is that the quality and frequency of work drives visitor behaviour. So if there's good work, it's happening often, people get the habit of going. And secondly, the experience they have and that desire to come down earlier is a key economic driver. The decision to come into town will drive in effect what that nighttime economy looks like, and the decision to stay in town after the show. In the middle is the thing that the council and the community and the arts sector have been dealing with since 2020, which is we've been in an incredibly unstable period. First, the impact of COVID, and secondly, the earthquake building requirements and the closures or the anticipated closures they've impacted all three of those areas. They've created a very unstable environment for producers planning shows, audiences have lost the habit of going, and the economy has suffered accordingly. So what have we been doing? The timeline is showing the work since 2020. We've taken a multi-pronged approach, broad as well as deep, to this question because it can't be solved by just one thing. And the timeline also shows that we started around 2020, but you're seeing on the screen a rapid escalation as we've come into 2024 and now 2025 as our work has continued to expand, I'd say exponentially. On the screen are a number of initiatives that comprise a strategic whole and where we've assigned a lot of human resource. We've also commissioned external advice to management from independent entities to have a look at how our venues are performing. And we're now in phase 2 working with Economic and Wellbeing and Venues Wellington in terms of implementing a response to this advice. Throughout this period, we've continued to build client-side, what we call client-side structures, which is the way we bring the voice of the sector into decisions that are directly affecting them. And this work has resulted in a number of concrete achievements. As you can see, we've simultaneously wanted to work in a holistic way across the whole of the network of production and performance, but we've also attempted to dig down deep into every opportunity that's presented itself. 9 of these are up on the screen, and Lucy, Stephen and Andy are going to touch on 3 of these as we approach the end of our presentation. But if I, for instance, draw your attention first to Te Matapihi. Well, actually, Lucy will talk about Te Matapihi. But if I show you an example of the small and the large, the small through our granting program is the ability to assist Footnote Dance Company to find themselves a home in which they're able to rent a dance studio that's available to a number of other companies. So they're acting as a facilitator in the community. The large would include the town hall, where since James invited us to join this process in beginning of 2024, we've shifted the emphasis from construction project to service design. We are thinking of this as the home of the National Music Centre, but maintaining its overall positioning over the generations as the People's Hall. A number of you may have had your graduations there or been at a ball, or the town hall is the centre of the people's activity. We're very focused on how to turn something which had very poor visitor experience into something that will have a much better visitor experience and therefore drive activity in Tanako and increase and respond to the investment the council's already making here. We're looking at how we use the CapEx to offset the price points for producers. So by putting in some basic rig and some basic sound, that for the lower end of production, people don't have to hire those things in there, they'll be already in the venue. And we've, as I say, established client-side structures. We're now really escalating discussion with the National Music Centre, and we're at a very exciting time where we're starting to think about how those tenancies and how those new facilities going into the town hall, including 4 recording studios, are going to become activated for the sector and the public in general. Moving to Te Matapihi.
So in 2021, Council set a mandate for Te Matapihi ki te Anui. These 4 guiding principles have underpinned and guided our thinking, development and design continuously ever since. Full engagement with mana whenua, the first of our guiding principles, has been embedded into our spatial and architectural design through co-design with our partners Tihei, and also in our operational and service development, enabled throughout by our mana whenua reference group. Over the last 4 to 5 years, and as we look ahead to the reopening of Te Matapihi in early 2026, we are focusing on supporting the agency of mana whenua in this place and space and giving effect to takahere tupiki ora and through aho Tini. A visitor experience strategy has also been a key underpinning and guide to our spatial and service developments. With new and improved services, more public access space and accessible collections, Te Matapihi will be where the public meets council in the heart of our city, combining our flagship central library, the richness and heritage of our council archives, and Experience Wellington's capital E. It will anchor social infrastructure in the city, providing a range of civic and cultural activities for all Wellingtonians, from 0 to 100. One of our guiding principles is also focused on ensuring that Te Matapihi is the hub of creative, civic and humanities activities and a visitor attraction in its own right. And there will be opportunities and experiences grounded in creative sector partnerships, in particular leveraging the concentration of musical and performing arts in Tanako and the creative spine, and also with the literary sector and our wider community.
We reopened the Hannah Playhouse in late 2022 with a new remit. It's a laboratory space for mid to senior career artists. BATS is sitting in the city for the emerging artists, but where do you go from there when you're more established, especially if you wish to stay in this city to continue your practice as an artist? In partnership with the Hannah Playhouse Trust, we've operated the space as an accessible development home, and in its first 2 years of full operation, which is 2023 and 2024, we've assisted 1,023 artists, of which 23% were Māori and Pacifica. We've helped develop 10 new works, several of which have gone on to tour New Zealand and internationally. The Hannah Playhouse Trust have invested over $300,000 in upgrading the seating in the theatre to allow us to return the Playhouse to the flexibility of configuration not enjoyed since the late 1980s. We kicked it off by celebrating the building's 50th birthday in 2023, and have since signed an MOU with Auckland Live, which is the CCO that operates venues in Auckland, where they invest in local companies to develop a new work, and we house them at the Hannah Playhouse to allow them to develop that work. We've also engaged sector leader David O'Donnell to review the model, and he has reported back to us that it is a triumph delivering to the sector. We're about to launch a pilot residency program with a local company that faced having to leave the city, but have been encouraged to stay and develop new work over the coming year at the Hannah Playhouse.
Tōpuniki. Since 2022, we've been re-energising the current Tōpuniki with new programs and experimental initiatives really focused on inclusion and accessibility of all of Wellingtonians. And we've been growing its profile to create a strong foundation for a new reimagined Tōpuniki. Over the past few years, we've engaged directly with artists through talks, wānanga and surveys to really understand their needs and opportunities for a new Tōpuniki. We brought mana whenua on at the beginning who've worked alongside us from the project's inception, which has really ensured that they're strong partners and critical to the foundations and practice. We've worked to define how a new Tōpuniki can best support creative practitioners, the sector and Wellington's creative ecosystem. We've searched for ways to leverage investment and collaboration to expand opportunities for creatives, and we've reviewed data on the current Tōpuniki to inform strategic decisions and ensure long-term impact. The new Tōpuniki will be a hub of energy and experimentation for mana whenua, arts organisations and artists across the whole city. We're close to confirming a location and ready to make the shift. Kia ora.
So what's next? And in conclusion, we are in the process of defining the action plan years 4 to 6. It's currently in discussion internally because one of the things we would like to see in this period is other sections of council beyond creative capital, the CCOs, relevant CCOs and urban design picking up the challenge here of Tini. And we're planning to discuss the proposed actions with the sector in hui that we've got planned in March, April. It will come to you for adoption in May. And as I said before, there is now a new approach to action plans in the council, so it won't be the long list of the 72. It will be a more strategic look at and in some ways, a more open-ended set of invitations to other parts of council to participate. In conclusion, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to the Creative Capital team and the Tanako Te Matapihi teams because council is blessed to have people who are totally committed to the arts here. I can't think of a single person working on these projects and with us who isn't first and foremost wanting to see both the city thrive, the citizens thrive and the arts sector thrive. So these are passion projects and it's been a pleasure to lead it, and I'd just like to thank what has been a really significant body of work. And I hope the councillors feel, because I know you have your own constituents, and I hope that you are able to take from this messages, I suppose, about what the council you voted to invest in and what the council has done with that investment.
Ngā mihi nui, thank you all. We do have a few people on the list. Councillors, I forgot to say before, but the slides should have been emailed to all of you, so if you need to go back and check info. Our first parte me whānau.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. Thanks for this. Love your work. Love the strategy. Fabulous. In terms of, you touched on it in your concluding remarks about other sectors of council picking up some of the work, which is great. So is there an intention to either engage more, or maybe you already do this with our Mataho Aronui team as well when it comes to our events?
Yes, I should have mentioned them actually. We've worked extensively and closely with Mataho Aronui. They're embedded in every project. They're probably, I would say they're the section of council we have the most contact with outside, or probably outside property, given actually, I didn't mention property either. So the property, of course, is the owner of a lot of the big ticket items. So very close working relationships.
Wonderful, thank you. We know that there has been a reduction in funding from central government towards the arts, and it's tough times for the sector. And obviously we have limited means with what we can provide. So do you think perhaps on the horizon our role might change, or our purpose might change to ensure that we can keep the arts thriving in our city?
I would say that in the face of what seems like indifference at central government level to the plight that the creative sector is finding itself in, the council has sustained its commitment. You actually increased funding to artists, and we'll be coming back to talk to you about that. You've continued to support the venues that are the lifeblood of the sector. You've made sustained commitment to the importance of the arts in Wellington, and I'd congratulate you for that. Do we need to consider our role further? Yes, I think as funding appears to be contracting, the viability of some of what we treasure is going to come sharply into focus. And obviously, arts organisations are hit with the rising costs and inflation that everybody is. So, there can never be enough money in some ways, but what we attempt to do is make it as strategically valuable as possible. And from a council perspective, we're also thinking about the audiences and the ratepayers. The council is not a pure arts investment agency. It's one that its source of funding suggests that we should always be thinking of audience. And that's why the visitor experience pieces of work and all of that sits equally in the frame for us as the arts sector.
Thank you. One of the questions I usually get from constituents who are artists is access to venues. I know we have a venue review coming up, which is awesome. This is something I should know, but I don't, in terms of how we encourage more access for local artists to our venues. What does that look like? How is that managed?
It depends in part what venues you're talking about. So round the margins of this conversation, we've driven, for instance, the Hannah, and I think, Stephen, did you cite a figure of 1,027?
1,023 artists.
1,023 artists. So where we have venues under our direct control, we are driving access for them. But one of the questions that sector raises is access to the big venues, the big civic set pieces. I've touched on the fact that we also need to invest in helping them build work that can be seen, but there's no doubt that the current cost structure from the 2 years' worth of work we've done in partnership with Economic and Wellbeing and Venues Wellington, there are impediments here. We're considering at the moment what our response can be to that within the fiscally prudent frame that you will doubtless remind me of. But in the first instance, our first step is to really understand on a venue-by-venue basis what the cost structures are. At the same time, we know some of it is linked to technical provision, and that's why in the town hall we're putting in equipment to offset some of that cost.
That's really useful, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Phone.
That's you.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, thank you for the mahi. Really good to get the update. Much appreciated. Just following on from Mayor Whānau, just around the venues, do we have a time frame that we're looking for something? Are we looking for something concrete? Is there some particular advice that will come forward, and if there is, what is the time frame for that?
We had a discussion with ELT, so Anna Calver's head of the CCOs, Jamie Crump, and I talked with the ELT team a couple of weeks ago. I anticipate that the first step will be this particular financial modelling we need, and from that I would imagine we'll have an escalating focus on, okay, what is this telling us? We're about to reopen some of these venues. We're going to be doing a big push on utilisation. What does that mean for the operating model? But it is a conversation between us and Wellington NZ. And Anna, you might like to comment too.
Yeah, I just might add to that, Laurie. So we looked at other models, and in order to really improve access, the key solution was an operating grant, and now that might look like $2 million a year, and at the moment we're not in the position to be able to provide that. So the task that we've set Wellington NZ with is how can they improve the commercial performance of the venues, which they would then use that profit to subsidise, or enable is a probably better word, local users. And they would do that by implementing a strategic pricing structure. So, local artists, etc., would get a lower venue price than commercial hirers. At the moment, though, they need to make a profit, which at the moment they're not. So they're looking at, firstly, step one, understand what a venue by venue model is. Two, they're looking at, for example, how to in-house more of their food and beverage offering, making money off the bar, etc. And if in the years that they do make a profit, retaining that profit versus splitting it with us in order to be able to enable greater access. So they don't have we can switch it on at the moment. You'll know that we do have the Performing Arts Fund. So at the moment, that is the mechanism that local artists can apply for and be granted funding to reduce the price of venues. But yeah, I would say, Laura, we're about 12 months away from being able to, or 6 to 12 months away if you talk to and Heidi when Morton, when she next presents it in front of council, will be happy to share with us. They've got a timeline, we can share that with you in terms of when they're trying to implement some of these changes. But the biggest challenge of why that can't be turned on right now is the fact that we don't provide them with an operating grant.
Yep. Okay.
So, so they've basically, got to improve their profitability.
Thank you. I've got two more, but actually come back to me. That was quite a lot. Yeah. Thank you.
Sweet as. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you for all the great work, really appreciate it. And this also gives me a chance to say how grateful we've got such a great team that one of our members gets a big promotion and goes overseas. So well done, Andy. The rainbow community, this is a question for you, Andy. What more can we be doing to give visibility to rainbow stories and history, and also just about supporting rainbow artists as well? Got any further thoughts about that? Could be a long conversation.
Councillor Pennant. I guess, the team will work on this when I'm not here anymore, I suppose. But there's a lot of work that was, I guess. And it's in the genesis really around the Make Visible little pilot project that we did, and we realised that at that time there was a lot of history that wasn't visible through the city of things that had happened in the Rainbow Takatapui communities over the years, and there's a big opportunity to kind of to do some more work in that space. We have TRAC as well, which I know Council work closely with, and also Rainbow Wellington and other organisations that could support initiatives like that. But it's kind of also, obviously budget dependent and other things. But those kinds of initiatives really celebrate what Wellington is, which is, as you know, 6% of the population is Rainbow Takatapui, and that's the highest in the country for all the cities. Auckland is 4%. So we have an opportunity to do something pretty major and continue some of the great work the team have been doing, and the council does. Yeah, a lot of opportunity. You might like.
And then my next question, I'm really grateful for getting the presentation in advance, because page 4, 3.3, it's not in the time frame, but working with Greater Wellington Regional Council to improve the availability of affordable, active and public transport, arts and cultural activities. Obviously this is an extremely sore point. I'm just wondering what the time frame is for working with people, and is there a commitment to making it as easy as possible, because essentially you're competing with cars, that when people are getting to arts activities, the public transport is excellent and you should literally be able to walk out the door of the bus to the venue.
Yeah, I think we're doing two things here. One is we weren't funded to resource that development, and so and it may be that it wasn't in some ways correctly scoped as what we should do. So what we have done is twofold. One is crucially around Tanako, our thinking around, again, the network is if you don't get the transport right, you're making all the investment in that square, but people can't get to it. So we're working very closely with FARS and others in property. James is leading this work to look at where the transport flows are, how you create visible stops that you can get off at. Since we joined the Town Hall project in the beginning of 24, we actually addressed the question of accessible access, which hadn't been fully factored in for the Town Hall. In terms of the Wakefield Street entrance. At that point, people were still having to come in the East Hall, which we've now solved with the architects. So we are thinking holistically about transport, and things like the transport corridor, where the buses flow and where they block access to Tanako is not desirable. It's better to think about the pedestrian traffic, the bus traffic, and ultimately the Uber and private car traffic, how we enable all of that. Second thing we're doing, and this is within James's department, is we're actually starting to look at a pilot with the parking team about how we might connect buying a ticket to attend a show with getting a park, and so to drive both parking revenue out of our buildings. I realise that's not your question about private cars, but
Sorry, that was
nonetheless,
not my question.
people do use private cars, and we want to enable that as well. Yeah.
And just my last question for now, I'll talk to you about that later. The measuring success is always an interesting one in local government, where we've talked about in progress achieved.
Yeah.
Some of them are very, very difficult to achieve, and you've said that they have been achieved. I'm just wondering, next time there's a report back, is there possibility of giving a bit more detail about what exactly has been achieved and what more there is still to be done?
Yes, that's why we think the new drive towards a different kind of action plan would be helpful. I mean, when we went through it, we reviewed it, discussed all the things we'd done, but achieved is achieved finished or is achieved a moment in time. So some of them are really ambitious statements about the engagement of mana whenua, for instance, and you can't really say that's achieved. But nonetheless, we have made really significant, what we were asked to do, we've done, and in Te Matapihi and Toiponiki, across the city, you're seeing a significant body of work that could be achieved, but it's not the end of the conversation. So in some ways, the structure of the action plan 1 to 3 gave us some difficulties. We also tried to report to you, but we found that we couldn't list this. It is a technical question, but a number of actions support more than one initiative. And so we struggled, do we list all the things we do against everyone, which means you would get a very, very large report, or do we try to consolidate? So for 4 to 6, our intention is to have a much simpler framework against which we're then able to show you more clearly what the work is that we're doing without having to be reporting against 3.2.1 and so on. Yep.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have about 8 people on the party list, so I'm going to ask, try just round it to 1 question. If you have to, you can do 2, but just in the interest of fairness, so everyone gets to ask a question. Righto, Councillor Young.
Thank you. I removed my live thing because you had that huge photograph of me in front of you, and I thought it might be scary. Look, I've got lots of questions, but
I was
as
looking
it's
at
one,
your box.
Carefully curated so you can't see anything that will scare you, Sarah. My first question is about Wellington Opera. What are we doing to assist Wellington Opera? Because I know that their next performance, I've forgotten what it is on a knife edge, and it's touch and go. And bearing in mind, it's been, they've had good audiences, and it's a big employer of Wellington artists and tradesmen and craftsmen, etc.
We're in discussion with them, we're aware of that issue, and we've sought through Democracy Services the capacity to bring an out-of-meeting proposal from them to the Grants Committee on, I think it's the 11th, isn't it? Yep.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll do the other question. Oh, just one last thing. First of all, thank you for all your help, everyone. But also, Andy, we are going to miss you so much when you go off to Fiji. So thank you, because you've been great to work with. Really appreciate it.
Whoa. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Thank you, Tim, again. And my question is just, is it fair observation to say that currently there are not much activities after February, and what our venues booking looks like, example, Maikafola, TSB, compared to Opera House, which is really very kind of busy. And you mentioned pricing might be the issues, what are the expensive venues in the country, how that can be addressed, and what the booking of the venues looks like.
Right. We can't answer that question because we don't run the venues. Venues Wellington run the venues, so we can't answer a question about what the bookings look like. But riffing on the points that Anna made, our view is there's a number of factors that drive utilisation. We all want to get utilisation up. It's much better to have the venues packed with activity throughout the year than, say, 3 big concerts by Eminem. So the focus on local production and the importance of values around that have to sit with the council as well as any event will do as long as it makes a profit. So Venues Wellington have a difficult path to walk here, and they're also programming, of course, for very broad spectrum trace across the city. But in our view, the goal is increased frequency will drive economic activity in the city, which is to everybody's advantage.
One last question. In that case, what that looks like then, working relationship with some organizations, it's a bit sad example, losing the homegrown from, going out of the city. What that relation looks like, and is there any that support from your side, and what has been done to keep them here?
Yeah, again, that's actually a body of work that sits with Wellington NZ, not with us. They run those, that's a relationship they hold. Anna, do you want to comment on that? Yep.
Yeah, Councillor, I can answer that. In terms of, so I firstly would look at a contract mechanism for how long events are held here. So events like WOW, we try and lock them in for as long as possible. So that's one. With homegrown, we did have many conversations with the owner, Andrew Tuck, to get him to stay, including increasing our investment in that event, but ultimately he wanted to move that event. So what we're doing now is recruiting, I guess, more festival content to fill that gap. So we look at our major events as a portfolio and just make sure that we've got events that suit all audiences.
Cool. Councillor Free.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I should know this, but I'm just wondering about the Tāwhiri warehouse, and if you could just tell us a little bit more about where it's located and what it does.
Mm-hmm. It's at Te Whaia in Newtown, which is the old showgrounds. It's the home of the National Schools of Dance and Drama, and Tāwhiri moved in there with assistance from the council during this period, and it's really to do with the roof project. They've established I think it's a 1,000-seat warehouse there. 1,000 standing?
1,000 standing.
1,000 standing warehouse, and it was identified as filling a particular development need, again, for people to develop large-scale production. So it's complement to the Hannah. They've had some issues that the council's own works in that building have been delayed. There's been complexity always around building, and so they haven't had the most stable platform from which to operate the warehouse, but it opened in 24 and it's being used by the sector, and we're in discussion with them at the moment actually about what this next year of operation looks like and the goals we'd like to, the shared goals we have around the development of the creative sector. Yep.
So it's a performance venue?
It's a performance and rehearsal venue.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and thank you very much for the work done on the Hannah Playhouse to get it back into some sort of service after years of being shut. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. You mentioned here about 1,200,000 people coming to our performances. Have we got any way of measuring how many of those people are actually coming in from outside Wellington?
No, that's actually the attendance to the city's delivered signature events. It's not just performances. That would be many more millions across a 3-year period. That's purely around the signature events that the city's delivered. No, we don't measure out-of-town visitation to those because it's not a ticketed event. They're free events.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thanks. And regarding poor visit...
Chung, just to note that we do on any event that's in our performance venues and major events.
Yep, okay, great, thanks. Second question is regarding the visitor experience, do you think a deterrent would be that if we actually expand, say, a dinner and going to a show and then some sort of function afterwards, do you think that having a maximum of 2 hours parking would be a deterrent? Is there any way we can actually talk to our parking people about expanding that time? Because if they have to go back to the car within 2 hours, would that be a deterrent to them not sort of making a whole night of things?
My recall is that we've fixed that issue. So my recall is that There was a parking resolution passed which caused some problems in that. You're exactly right. People can't nip out in the interview to feed their meter, but that has been addressed. I'd have to ask Kevin what we've done, but it's not an impediment now, my understanding. Yep.
Okay, that's
Councillor
great,
Chung,
thanks.
we've just had a clarification as well, but it's after 6 p.m. the window extends to 3 hours, which takes you to 8 p.m. So that's the max. So you should be able to go to a show and just pay for parking once. Cool. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora. Just we're having a bit of a korero on the noise zoning in the draft district plan. Sorry, Sean, you sitting there has prompted my. I'm happy to take this offline, but if we could just have an update on how those our asks are tracking, that would be awesome.
Very good. So my team have been working with Gisella's team to understand precisely what the visitor experiences Giselle is looking to create and curate for the city are, and then what that looks like from the regulatory point of view. This is a good example of the Tini approach in practice. It's the first time that district planners have worked directly with our arts colleagues in this way, and we should be back to you with the district plan papers to explain where we've come to and how that fits with those experience plans.
Thank you. Just one more quick question. Toi Pōneke, just what's our time frame? I'm a bit excited about it, but yeah, just when do you think we'll be looking for an announcement? And will that come back to council or will we be briefed on that?
Yes, I'm not sure what we can say given this is a live stream situation, Laurie, but Councillor Foon,
sorry,
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah.
But it's we are approaching a very exciting moment, I think. So, and yes, we'll brief you. Yep.
I'll hover around.
Yep.
Councillor Wineta.
Hey, kia ora, just on the sector working groups, I recall there was some conversation in December last year of formalising them somewhat more than the kind of ad hoc approach that's being used now. Has there been any headway made on that?
This is a tricky one for us because if you think about the creative sector, it's really like talking about the meat, the dairy, and the kind of vegetable industry as if they're one thing. So it is simply impossible, and I speak from long experience of having to try and do this, it's simply impossible to construct one group to rule them all because you just have endless issues with representation. Even within a subset like music, you might have Baroque instrument players sitting alongside independent music guitarists, so the span of the sector is really significant. What we've found most effective is twofold. One is we have appointed relationship managers to major or anyone we give a grant to through the multi-years, which is a couple of $1 million a year. In fact, it's more like 2.6 million. Each of those organisations has a relationship manager who meets with them regularly. And for specific projects, we will assemble a group of people who are pertinent to that. So, for instance, we've just met with the live independent musicians, and this is again a collaboration with Anna's team. We're looking at when she receives a report that she's commissioned, whether the council will then develop a live music strategy. At that point, we will appoint a live music group from the sector to support that. So we've found a project by project approach more productive than trying to wrangle an abstract committee of representative committee. Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Well, I hope all my fellow councillors are attending the Fringe Festival so they can get to experience firsthand some of the benefits that the policies we've just been hearing about have been delivering to Wellington. But my question for you is this, is that it does seem to be that this has been an incredibly successful area of initiative on the part of council and your team. And I don't feel like we're getting the community recognition. And I just wonder if we should be reviewing our branding, and creative capital is now becoming a little bit some of a tired proposition, and the wrapper of the chocolate is actually quite important. I think the chocolate has definitely improved in quality, and you guys have done fantastic work. And as I say, the Fringe is sort of illustrative of all the venue success and the activities that are happening in the arts scene. But I feel like the branding isn't really up to scratch. And are you thinking about some sort of renewal of that aspect of the culture capital and our role in it?
There's a lot of ambivalence about, we're having this discussion yesterday. There's a lot of ambivalence about should Wellington claim such a title and what does it mean? Is it effectively a competitive title against others, or is it a statement of, yep. I'd say that at the moment our focus is actually on the branding related to the ventures that are about to reveal themselves. So we're thinking about the Te Matapihi brand and the Tanako brand. You've got so many constituent organisations in that. We're thinking about what is it we're saying about the creative sector in relation to all of those parties. In fact, we'll have some work to show you on this. So our energy has actually been at that end, thinking about how important brand is. I absolutely agree with you around those big projects rather than our own title of our team. Yep.
Councillor Brown, could you use the microphone, please?
I guess my feeling is that we're not getting the recognition that our efforts and the success of those efforts warrant.
Just a partai.
Yeah, I think we'd welcome a discussion. Now you've heard this presentation about what you'd like to do with it as well. I mean, it's the council's achievements. You made the investments here. So how do we get greater recognition of it? I think it's a valid conversation we should have. Yep.
I just have two quick partai. The first one is, since the strategy began, have we seen kind of new gaps in the arts environment open up in Wellington? I'm just thinking about all the central government kind of changing in their priorities.
I'd say the reduction in funding that's going on and the instability. For instance, Creative New Zealand's now reviewing its sort of multi-year framework, which is creating significant anxiety and instability. So there are gaps to do with, and actually we're seeing the cuts. I mean, people are asking us to close the gap of a central government cut. So we're certainly seeing that. I think the focus on inclusion and diversity in the aspirations of the city and the aspirations of the council have never been matched by a substantial uplift in funding. And as we continue to develop those relationships and see this work flowering, there is a question for you to consider how to support it and give it more fuel. Otherwise, what you're doing is taking the pie and dividing it. It's what the arts sector calls death by 1,000 cuts, the salami method. You're just slicing. So I mean, both my answers are about money, but I suppose it's inevitably where I end up in this conversation. I don't know if my colleagues agree. Yep.
Aye, thank you. I definitely feel like there's a good opportunity, especially with city deals coming up, to be a bigger and better advocate for the region and for our artists. Well, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the partai today, but I just really wanted to take a second to especially acknowledge your mahi, Andy Lowe, for, I guess, just like the energy and the positivity. And we know in the arts sector, a lot of our mahi really weighs on those personal relationships and the building of those relationships over time, and beyond just your mahi at Wellington City Council. I know you've had a big impact in the region, so definitely a loss for Aotearoa as well as a loss for council, but just wanted to thank you for that. Yeah, cheers.